Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So, tonight's topic is Ryokan and Playfulness. And Will asked if I would say some words first, and then we maybe can all talk together. He thought maybe I know more about Ryokan than he does, but who knows Ryokan, you know? It's one of those things. But, so Ryokan, he was tall for a Japanese man, very lanky, and you know, the point where we discover his uniqueness, let us call it, is after he returns to Niigata. He's been through his training, he's wandered around through Kyoto, his father has died, and at that point he decides to go back to his home ground. So he goes back, and he's living in a kind of a shambles place, and then he's living down by the water, and he's just roaming all over the place trying to find some place to stay. And after quite a few years, somebody gives him, lets him stay in Gogoan, which is pretty high up on the mountain in Mount Kugami. It would be a hill to us, but in Japanese it's a mountain. So he goes back and forth to the town and back to his Gogoan, and he interacts with the people in the town, and he gets a reputation of playing with the children. And there are numerous anecdotes about him in connection with his playfulness and the children. And I have never emphasized that aspect of him because I think it's easy to think of him as anecdotal rather than the very serious poet that he was, or the playful poet, which I will get to, I hope. But I think it tends to, too many anecdotes tend to make him seem very trite or a little dopey or a little just not all there. And it's just not true about him. He was a very serious scholar. And so we know the anecdote. You have that in the beginning of Kakurembo, where he's hide and go seek. He plays hide and go seek, and this is a story that is told endlessly through Japan. He hides in this little hut under a haystack in the back of this woman's workshop, and the kids can't find him at all. And they go everywhere, and finally they just give up. So their parents call them for dinner, and they go home. And after it gets dark, the woman who owns the place goes down to get some hay or something from her barn, and Ryokan has been asleep. And she wakes him up, and he says, "Shh, don't say anything, the children will find me, shh, shh, shh." And she says, "Ryokan, look up at the sky, the moon is out." And he just starts laughing, and so that's one of the anecdotes, and that's a very famous one. There were other stories, of course, about how the children gathered around him. They would often encircle him, and a little bit they would make fun of him. He was a bit of a caricature to some of the children at times. And some of the townspeople were a little bit upset about that because they thought that the behavior was improper on the part of the children. They were kind of disrespecting him by taunting him. But he didn't get upset about it. But when he got tired of it, he would just lie down and pretend that he was dead. And then the kids would go away and leave him alone because he would just not move. Just lie there, and they would get bored, and so they would go away, and then he would get up and go away and go on his merry way. So he's very smart like that. That was a very smart thing to do. So he's smart in the middle of those anecdotes. But so he lives in Japan, and the notion of playfulness, or the notion of jokes and so forth, are very, very different from what we do in America and our kind of repartee back and forth. There are no sarcastic words in Japan, in Japanese. You are thought very, very poorly if you use anything sarcastic, if you say anything like that at all. Very akin to Native American humor. You just do not do that. You don't abuse anybody with words and humor. And so sometimes we aren't sure about the naivete of Ryokan-san in relationship to playfulness. It's something we almost cannot do. We are very coarse and almost cunning in our play. We sometimes put people on with playing them, and kind of undercutting them in a way, thinking that we are superior when we kind of play them. That does not exist in Ryokan-san's Japanese. But what I want to suggest, though, is a kind of a playfulness that is a little bit more sophisticated to talk about, but I think it's something that we actually can do. And that is the idea of Ryokan-san's deep connection to history and to the scholarship of history, particularly poetry. He was very well read in the court poetry, in the Manyoshu, all of the historic poetry, and Confucian. He read Confucian work, and so he was very, very scholarly. And at the same time, his poetry borrows a great deal from historical poetry. Not copied, but deeply, deeply borrowed from. And it's this kind of attitude toward conversing and playing with those voices of the great masters who have gone before us that Ryokan-san did. He kind of played with that in his poetry in a very deep way. And, to that degree, he is often criticized by literary scholars, literary critics, because of that. Because if you are a scholar of Manyoshu or the other great classics of Japan, Japanese literature, Japanese poetry, you can see that resonance come through. And so he's criticized for that. But the other piece is that there is no such thing as such an original voice that the history of poetry or art does not come through. There is no such thing as somebody who is beyond the voices of the past. So this kind of playfulness Ryokan-san had in his poetry, in his work, that I say is, I think, important for us to consider in our own sense of playfulness about our own art and where we construct our art and where we find creativity. If you are a drummer, you know that you have listened to other drummers and you learn from Gene Krupa or the great masters. You certainly do. So you are not just an island unto yourself who took up sticks and just played the drum and made up your own thing. If you were going to be a conductor, you're going to study music and you're going to figure out how to hold an orchestra together. You don't just suddenly say, hey, I think I'll do this, Unlike some of my students that I had in poetry who felt that they were people who wanted to write poetry and it wasn't necessary for them to ever read anybody else's poetry in the whole world. I just said, well, good luck, honeys. Well, you'll read a few of them while we're in this class, at least. But, our engagement then with the great artists of the past are, if we don't take ourselves so seriously, we can engage very playfully with those who have gone before us. it is, I mean, they are there to speak to us. And all art that we create borrows from all art from before. There is no such thing as doing a piece of art that isn't connected to some other art. So this is a kind of playful language together that we take up, whether it is in novels or poetry or painting or music or whatever art, or flowers, or whatever kind of art we undertake. It's from the great masters we speak to, and we listen and we play with them if we don't take ourselves too seriously. And I think that was an important aspect of Ryokan-san. He didn't take himself so seriously, and yet he is recognized as one of the great poets of the Edo period. So, I think that great artists do that. They play with what was before. If we look at the paintings of Picasso, Picasso borrowed from everybody. You can put a couple of his paintings together and you can see he must have stood that painting of that woman right there, and then he painted in his abstract fashion over here, making her not at all beautiful with his palette, according to this beautiful painting over here. But he was Picasso, and that's what he did. And we can see that in the artists. We can always see their borrowings from others, and they are there. And we might even say, I would go so far as to say that the painters or the artists who have influenced us are really who our true parents are. You know, we are the children of whoever we have learned from in art. And those are the parents that have taught us how to play on the canvas, or how to play on the page of poetry, or play in whatever art we have taken up. So that's how I see Ryokan-san's playfulness when I think of what does it mean for us today. In what way can we be playful around Ryokan-san's art? We can not take ourselves too seriously, and we can understand that all of our creative voices, all the creative voices are simply echoing from the past and resonating in conversation with those who have gone before us. So let's see what we can drum up from there, so it's not me droning on, as it were. So that's what I got. So.
Well, I don't know, I just think of like playfulness, and like just thinking about William Carlos Williams. Mm-hmm. It's like some poets want to break your heart, but he was trying to break our language. Mm-hmm. You know, it's almost this like, what can you get away with kind of thing. I think in our society anyway, how can we like push this and do more? Sure. Like what are the limits of this medium?
Mm-hmm. Which is really playing with it.
Yeah.
Entirely playing.
It's like that question. It's like, what's possible, I think, for me. Mm-hmm. Is at the center of it.
Well, certainly, every age has pushed something. I mean, you know, speaking about drums, we have a drummer here with us, and the whole array of drums have changed incredibly through time, and those constantly get pushed to see, you know, what can you really do on this instrument, and so every century has pushed.
I don't know. I feel like that sort of departs a little bit from how I would imagine the spirit of Ryokan. This idea of like improvement, you know, because it's like going back to the past for inspiration, but then, like, where does that inspiration go?
Well, you can only be contemporary. Everybody is contemporary. You can't write out of your contemporary time. Even if you are writing sonnets, it will sound contemporary.
Oh, it will. But I think it's in that, like, pushing of the envelope, it's almost like writing for posterity itself. It's like sort of like we already have the poems of the past. Like what will codify our time?
Well, we don't know. I mean, the next generation will decide that.
And I think it's like you start writing for that, is my feeling.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that. What do you think about that? Is that a mistake?
To write for posterity?
Mm-hmm. Is that to try to be famous?
No, I don't. I think it could. I think fame is sort of about. I don't know. Because if you think about, like, Plato, it's like, who's more famous than Plato? Or Socrates would be a better example. But he was also murdered in his time.
Sure, and it's because we've institutionalized philosophy that he continues, actually.
I just think about, like, fame, I think it's like when you are writing for, like, the contemporary audience. Because you know it works, and that's sort of like your motive. You're not really seeing what else is possible, because you never really know if that's going to work or not. You're always sort of taking a chance. If you're, like, pushing your painting in, like, weird abstract places, I mean, like, generally speaking, those end up, like, in your closet, and, like, when you die, someone just throws them away. I think to, like, really, like, push it, it's like you're going beyond, like, what is contemporary in that moment.
Well, I think that's true, but I think the idea that you would then be painting for posterity, that to me, I don't understand that. I understand painting because you feel that you see something that you need to push that envelope, whatever it is. But to have the idea that is going to stand against the greats is to want fame, to me. But maybe I'm wrong. Or to, certainly everybody wants their art to be recognized. Even Ryokan-san wanted that.
Shouldn't we want our works of art to be great?
Yes, we should aim to paint as greatly as we can. That should be our voice. But I don't know, I guess maybe I'm too small or something, and I can't imagine having a painting in the museum. Or painting for that.
When I was a child, I could, of course. I pored over art books, and I told people at 10, 11 years old, I'm going to be a famous artist. And but the way it works with me now, often with the painting, sometimes it feels like a conscious conversation with other artists or previous artists. In and out of that.
Sure.
And often the inspiration will come from something I see.
Yeah.
But then it becomes very naturally just an expression, and I actually don't think about it in words, so I just don't think about posterity, and there are times I want to push things beyond the way that I usually do things. I want to break that a kind of a barrier that I come up against of a habitual way of painting. But I don't think about being great necessarily. I do want to do the best.
Yeah.
I do want to have real quality there, and I do. So that's a goal.
Yeah. But I don't know. I think posterity it can't be our business.
I would like to kind of modify the word, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it's sort of like, it's like you have something to say.
Sure, okay,
and you want someone to hear it,
correct,
and that hasn't happened yet.
okay,
You know,
yeah.
so it's like that
Sure,
communication forward.
right. So that I completely understand. That is, we don't do something to shove it in the drawer. I mean, any art creation is meant to be shared. And so, so we want somebody to recognize it, somebody to say, oh, you know, that's good, or that's not good, or just somebody else to read it. But, the issue of posterity is none of our business. There's nothing, you know, that's beyond.
Is a poor word choice,
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
think the sentiment is, because it's like you're writing for something that's going to happen. It's like that kind of like faith in like someone hearing you
Right, yeah,
in the future.
sure. Mm,
And so you're sort of writing for it's not like a for fame or for a specific audience per se, but it's
to have joined the conversation. Could you say it that way?
but it's sort of like to make the but then it's your
To
work,
create
so
the
it's like to
conversation.
make it.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, even Ryokan-san wanted his poetry to be recognized. And, you know, he had spread it all over. It had gone everywhere. And he did ultimately gather some level of local fame in the area of Niigata. And he very much was proud of that and was very pleased that he was recognized.
Mm.
So, for all of his great humility, he wanted that. He wanted that people recognized his work.
Well, that's continuing the conversation, isn't it?
Correct, yeah,
So
that
I mean,
is.
I think we all want that, whatever
Yeah.
art,
Yeah.
creative aspect, or creative work that we do
Right,
is, we don't, if you're just doing it for yourself, that's only half of it.
yeah, right,
So,
right.
But with this sentiment of like Ryokan and like that recognition, because I've sort of learned to. There's this idea that we should question kind of our relationship to fame,
Mm.
because it's a very culturally different way of relating to fame, in the sense that people become famous in our society independent of like having something worthy of fame. Where I think in like past times, I imagine in Ryokan's time, there was like art wasn't a reflection of the quality of the person making it. So it was like his poem succeeding in the world. It's sort of like, I think a metaphor is almost like your works of art become like your children. Like they sort of go out into the world and sort of live or
Mhm.
not,
Mm-hmm.
but their glory shouldn't reflect back onto you.
Yeah, I guess that's true. It's like, as I have said many times, if people say nice things about you and you're in the same room, if you don't listen, it won't hurt you. Like that kind of thing.
But you want people to say nice things about your art.
Yeah, you do.
Because, like, I mean...
Yes, that's true. Well, I mean, people wanted Ryokan-san's art, and it was becoming valuable, and particularly store owners would say, "Would you please paint the sign for my store?" And so he would do that, and he was happy to do that, and maybe he would get a meal out of it or something like that. So people would take care of him in that way. So his calligraphy was sought after. So yeah, I'm here.
So I think whatever our creative endeavors are, whether we intend to be innovative or whether we intend to, just kind of be to entertain ourselves, we're always standing on the shoulders of those who came before us.
Yeah.
And you had described that, but I think that we don't often think of that as being playful with the generations that have gone before us.
Yeah.
So it's a new way of kind of thinking of, our influences or our,
Yeah.
the people that we try to emulate.
Yeah.
Be an interesting
Yeah.
exercise to carry that forward.
Yeah. Just a way to think about it.
Yeah.
Simply because, I mean, imagine you're in a room with some great drummers. I can only think of Gene Krupa at the moment because
Yeah,
I'm
you
old.
gotta know, you gotta know Gene Krupa out here, yeah.
So, okay, so some great drummers. You're gonna talk and you're gonna laugh and you're gonna share things and you're gonna, you're gonna just kind of play together. I don't mean play the drums together, but you maybe play about techniques and laugh over this sort of thing. And that's how it would be if you gathered all of the history people from history, or the painters that you love, or the people of literature that you love, you'd
I've
be
often
talk
thought
and
of
laugh.
having like a salon with all the past people that you admire
Yeah.
and just having this conversation with it. I've played with that idea actually in a book or an article, having
Yeah.
all these people in the same room that could share their creative, I just think it would be so
Yes, they
rich,
do. It would be fun. I have a picture of a painting right now as you say that. It's The Last Supper. With whoever you like.
I was thinking of the cover of the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I just see a bunch of disgruntled philosophers.
Who can't laugh, right? Don't know how to laugh.
Some poets there too. They're pretty sullen as well for some reason.
Yeah.
Appreciate how you described the different ways that people view Ryokan-san, because in one sense you can kind of you can easily see him as kind of a character that's I think that the Bodhisattva is called Hote.
Yes.
Kind of like that kind of character who's
Right.
almost oafish and always sleepy and handing
Yeah.
out toys to kids or whatever. So I don't know the serious side of Hote except for
Yeah.
the sort of oafish side of himself.
Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt Ryokan was eccentric. And he could afford to be. He lived on the mountain and he lived freely, and he also suffered a great deal. His diet was difficult, and he had to carry water and wood up the hill in order to have fire. And so he had a hard life, extremely hard life. And at the same time, he laughed easily. And but he had a great mind, and that's what I think gets lost sometimes, that people think of him as being a silly guy, and he was a great scholar.
Too, it's like my current sort of rumination on him, but it's the first Ryokan poem. And it's just like, he lived as a monk. And I think in the traditional sense, very few Japanese, I think, do or have.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think extremely few.
Yeah.
Outside of the comfort
very
of the
few.
temple.
Very few.
And it's like he did, just the... the gall of that.
Yeah.
Because he did it, and it's like, are you pretending? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's
right.
that point of...
Yeah. We've only had one guy do a month of January out in Gogowan. Ryokan was there for years and years and years up in Gogowan, up in the mountain, with the snow and the cold and the rain and all of that. And the other thing that I learned about him, though, this little anecdote, is that he was afraid of mice.
Who isn't, though? If you're being honest.
I know.
You don't know if they're going to scurry on you. It's scary.
So one of the things that the kids would do then is that, when they just wanted to, and they loved to scare him also, that they would jump out from someplace, "Grah!" like that. Parents didn't like to do that, but he thought that was fun. But, so they'd all be around, and all of a sudden, "Oh, a mouse, a mouse!" And he'd go, "Oh." Run away. So, which is a funny thing, because there has to have been a lot of mice up at Gogowan, up in the mountain. Sure there were, all over the place, little field mice running around. So, Anyway, so yeah, just think about the issue of playfulness in relationship to those masters whom we have selected from art history of all of the various kinds of art that we maybe those are our parents. That's how I see them. Those are our real parents. So, anybody else anything?